Hi, my name is Shannon Costello and I'm a registered dietitian with Corporate Fitness Works. Today we're in my home kitchen getting ready to make some Hearty Minestrone bean soup. This is a really delicious recipe using common pantry staples like your vegetable broth, beans, diced tomatoes, and pasta, but also some nutritious freezer ingredients that are great to have on hand. This recipe is all cooked in one pot, making it super easy to prep and to also clean up. Keeping a variety of frozen ingredients like fruits and vegetables on hand is a great idea because this makes it really easy to add some vegetables into any meal, creating color to your plate, but also ensuring that you get at least 3 servings of these vegetables a day. Plain frozen fruits and vegetables might actually have more of their nutritional value compared to fresh because after harvest, they're immediately frozen, halting that ripening process and holding on to all those nutritional benefits. Versus their fresh components, they have to go through a production system and transportation and sit on the shelves for a while before you actually get them to your table. So in this recipe, we're going to be using 3 different frozen veggies. The great thing about this soup and a lot of soups is that it allows you to swap in different ingredients if you don't already have something on hand. So for example, the recipe calls for a mixture of frozen peas and carrots. Well, I have a family member that's allergic to carrots, so I'm going to swap in some frozen zucchini that I froze myself a couple weeks ago. Another example is if you don't have frozen green beans on hand, swap in frozen broccoli or frozen asparagus. Garlic cloves need to be fresh. Well, if you don't have fresh, you can easily use garlic powder. These are just a few of the examples that allow you to be creative in the kitchen and change up the flavors. So that way, when you make this recipe for the second or third time, you can use different ingredients, different vegetables, different flavorings, adding some variety to your meal plan. Before we get cooking, let's look over some of the ingredients. As I mentioned, you're going to be using some very common pantry staples. So we have some oil for sauteing. I'm going to be using avocado oil, but you're welcome to use olive, canola, or pure vegetable oil. We have vegetable broth. You can also use chicken broth or bouillon cubes, but when you're looking at broths, you always want to purchase low sodium. That goes for your canned diced tomatoes too. You want to look for the no salt added varieties. Sodium can add up throughout the day, leading to high blood pressure and other cardiovascular diseases. So we want to limit our sodium intake as much as we can when buying packaged or processed foods. In this recipe, you can use either garbanzo beans, which is another name for chickpeas, or white beans. Both types of beans are going to have a neutral flavor, but they're protein-packed and full of soluble fiber. That soluble fiber is great for easing digestion and improving our cholesterol. Another pantry staple we have is pasta. You're going to want to use more of a short grain noodle, so this is fazouli, but you can also use penne or macaroni if you have it on hand. The version I'm using is an ancient grain pasta, but you want to look for a whole grain version like whole wheat or brown rice, whatever you have in your pantry. The last pantry staple is going to be Italian seasoning. So I actually made my own using oregano, basil, and thyme, all dried herbs to have in your cabinet to flavor up. And we're going to use about 1 to 2 tablespoons of that. So you can either make your own or just buy an Italian seasoning blend. As far as our freezer and some of our fresh ingredients, we have frozen peas. Again, this is going to call for frozen peas and carrots, but with my family member being allergic, I chose to do frozen zucchini instead of carrot. So I took a fresh zucchini 2 weeks ago that I was not ready to actually use. I chopped it, I blanched it in hot water, and immediately cooled it down in an ice bath, and then I froze it so that I could bring it out for this soup. We have our frozen green beans. Of course, you can buy these already chopped in the store. Mine just happened to be whole, so I'm going to let those thaw and then chop them into kind of large to medium chunks. We have half a white or yellow onion that we'll dice up. Fresh garlic cloves that we're going to mince. Love fresh garlic, it's delicious. Again, you can also use garlic powder if you don't have fresh garlic on hand. And then finally, we have some leafy greens. So you can choose anything from kale, spinach, chard, collard greens. You can even use frozen instead of fresh, whatever you have on hand. But adding some leafy greens into your soup is always a good idea because it's packed with good vitamins and minerals such as calcium, iron, and vitamins A and K. Now just a note on these leafy greens, because they do have a good amount of vitamin K in here. If you're on any type of blood thinner medication, just talk to your registered dietitian like myself or your doctor before changing your diet with your leafy greens, because it can have an impact on your blood thinning medications. Before we start cooking, the first thing we want to do is get all of our ingredients prepped. So chopping, draining, rinsing, opening cans, things like that. This is called mise en place, or in French, it means everything in its place. The reason we want to do this is it's going to make the cooking process go a lot smoother and easier. That way you're not flustered going in and out of cabinets, in and out of the freezer, or having to chop things while something's cooking. So this just makes this really simple. So what I've done is I've mixed my zucchini and peas, or your carrots and peas. I've diced my onion. I already made my Italian seasoning blend. I chopped my frozen green beans. That's if you didn't purchase already chopped green beans. I minced my garlic. I opened my chickpeas. I drained them in a colander and then rinsed them with cold water just to make sure there wasn't any excess residue or salt from the can. And I went ahead and I opened my canned tomatoes. Now when I pour this in, I'm actually going to save the can because I'm using both the vegetable broth and some extra water to make this soup nice and brothy. So to help get all the extra tomato juices and diced tomatoes out of here, I'll just rinse this can with about a cup or two of water and then pour that in. All right, so everything's prepped. Let's go ahead and head over to the stove and get ready to cook. We're going to be using a large stock pot. Excuse my well-seasoned pot I have here for soups and stews, but I've turned it on to medium heat already and I can feel it's pretty warm. So I'm going to go ahead and add my oil. Just a tip on making sure we don't add too much. I always like to just fill the cap, and that's about a tablespoon. So we did 2 tablespoons of that. And I can tell that it's already hot. So I'm gonna go ahead and add my diced onion. Ooh. And give that a few stirs so that it's all coated in the oil. And I'm gonna cook this for about 3 to 4 minutes. You'll start to notice that the onions are softened and turn a little bit translucent. So they change in color quite a bit. Onions are smelling and looking really good, so I'm gonna toss in my minced garlic. Because this is minced and it's really small pieces, your garlic's gonna cook pretty fast. So we're just gonna continually stir that for about 30 to 60 seconds until it's slightly toasted. We definitely don't wanna burn the garlic. So while I'm stirring that around, I'm gonna add my dried seasonings. These are great to add with your oil because when it's dried, you need to bring out the natural oils found in those seasonings. So we're just lightly toasting it before we add any liquid to the pan. So again, that's just another about 30 to 60 seconds. Bring some nice color and flavor to our onions and our garlic. And I'm just continuing to stir here. Now I'm gonna add my liquids. So I have my vegetable broth. We'll start to see some steam come, but it's gonna cool off. Already adding some good flavor. Now I'm still on medium heat for now, but once I get all of my liquids in, I'm gonna bring that heat up a little bit. So there we have your vegetable broth or chicken broth, whatever you prefer. Now just careful as you add these liquids because we don't want them to splash and they're gonna get hot. So I'm gonna come a little lower into the pot to add my diced tomatoes. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm gonna add a little bit more water to this soup because I like it really brothy. So I'm gonna go ahead and just fill this can. As you can see, there's a little bit of residue in there and I wanna get everything I can to get the most out of that flavor. So I filled the can with some more water. That's about 2 extra cups. I'm gonna gently pour that in. Give it a few stirs. Let everything mix together. And now I'm gonna bring that heat to about medium high. We're gonna try to bring this to a boil. and that way we can add the pasta and get the pasta ready to cook. As the broth and liquid is coming to a boil, I'm going to go ahead and add my frozen veggies, which are slightly thawed already, but by adding it to this warm and getting warmer liquid, it'll help thaw the veggies even more and they'll get cooked throughout the rest of the cooking process. So I'm stirring those in. That was the frozen zucchini or carrots, your frozen peas, green beans, or again, whatever you've swapped in and have on hand. And then I'm also gonna add my chickpeas. And this will allow all the flavors that are already in that broth and the dried seasonings and the cooked onions to meld right in with those veggies and beans. So we're still waiting for this liquid to come to a boil. Okay. My soup has come to a boil, so I'm going to go ahead and add my 2 cups of pasta, which just happens to be the whole package, and I'm going to stir that in as I reduce the heat to about a medium so that this can stay on a simmer. So we're gonna let this cook for about 10 minutes or whatever your pasta package directions say, but you're gonna want to monitor the simmer to boil and adjust the heat accordingly. Otherwise, it'll take a little longer for that pasta to cook. So once this comes to a simmer, which means just light little bubbles on the surface, then I'll time it for about 10 minutes. Okay, so my timer has gone off, my pasta is cooked, and I've reduced the heat to a low, so it's stopped simmering. And I'm gonna add a little bit of pepper. You are welcome to add salt and pepper to taste based on your preference. I love pepper, so I'm gonna add that in. And then the last ingredient I need to add is my leafy greens. I've done 2 heaping handfuls of Tuscan kale. Again, you can use spinach, baby kale, collard greens. They can be frozen instead of fresh. But because Tuscan kale is a little firmer, it needs a little more time to cook. So I'm going to stir this in, make sure that it's all mixed with the liquid. And then I'm going to cover this since the heat has been reduced to low. I'm gonna let those greens wilt just a couple of minutes. It won't take too long. And then I'm gonna taste test if I need to add any more seasoning, salt, pepper, oregano, basil, thyme, whatever your preference might be. So let's let this simmer and wilt. And here we have it, our hearty minestrone bean soup. Great for lunch, dinner, making ahead for the family this week, or storing in an airtight container in the freezer for up to a month. You can even double this batch, that way you have some frozen soup on hand whenever you're in a crunch for time. Bon appetit!